The Washington Hilton, April 25th, 2026. Deep underground beneath the lobby, beneath the terrace, is the International Ballroom. 2,600 people in black tie. The President, the First Lady, the Vice President, the Director of the FBI, half the executive cabinet, the entire line of American succession, all packed into a single subterranean room. And walking down the stairs towards them is a 31-year-old, same age as Charlie Kirk when he was fatally shot, Caltech grad named Cole Thomas Allen, carrying a shotgun, a semi-automatic pistol, and a bag of knives. We all know the official story. We know he checked in on Friday. We know nobody checked his luggage suspiciously. We know he breezed past the lobby because of a hotel guest exemption. And we know he only got stopped at the magnetometers outside the ballroom doors because he finally broke into a sprint, a sort of a Naruto run. The media called it a catastrophic security failure, a near miss that would have triggered a constitutional crisis unlike anything in modern history. But this was more than a mere failed assassination attempt. We need to look at it as a successfully executed script. When you step back and view this anomaly not as a spontaneous glitch or a random tragedy, but as a deliberately authored text, the fingerprints of a state-sponsored intelligence operation become almost impossible to ignore. What we witnessed at the Hilton was not an accident. It was the deployment of an alternate reality game, an ARG, weaponized for modern informational warfare. It was also, superficially, a Psyop. Think about how covert operations used to work. The goal was absolute silence. You extract, you sabotage, or assassinate, and you leave no trace. But we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a post-truth, digitally hyper-connected era. And silence to the elite is suspicious. So intelligence agencies have adapted. They don't necessarily hide the data anymore. They, in fact, flood the zone and enter the digital breadcrumbs to this event, right? The phantom bots such as Henry Martinez, which we shall get into, the cryptic coordinates left on, ancient, antique burner Twitter accounts. And when you look at all of this, you see a sort of digital ecosystem of a highly specific, partially obscured puzzle. They're not hiding information anymore. In fact, they're extending an invitation. The architects of this event understand that the human brain is an aggressive pattern recognition machine. They know that if they drop a breadcrumb here, a bait there, open source intelligence communities and amateur internet sleuths will immediately latch onto it and begin digging. They will jump on it like a bitch on heat. And this is the core of modern psychological warfare. It is weaponized apophenia, plain and simple. And in these systems of modern psychological governance, engagement is a systemic requirement. It is the primary metric of any value within the system, even though, of course, that value is completely hollow. It is a mere tokenistic husk. So it's no longer about the depth of communication, but in fact, it's about the efficiency of the frequency and intensity of interaction within the digital infrastructure. And of course, by and large, by extension, rather, the biodigital society itself. And so we persist within this sort of economy of signs, right, where material goods become secondary to the symbols of status, identity, and attention, of course, compulsive engagement with the system. So these signs are traded and amplified through both digital engagement and the sort of faux engagement through media and, of course, vis-a-vis these psyops. And moreover, as well, um, the system itself runs like an Ouroboros, based upon contemporary dialectics. So these are always based around dualistic fault lines that are antagonized and played upon. And so the dialectic itself both shapes our reality and it shapes our relationship with the system, where the system demands a constant feedback, which is the engagement, to refine its control over the user. And within the mass media landscape as well, it isn't just necessarily about delivering information as we would understand traditional propaganda to be, but it is actually a theatre of the absurd. It's an economy of signs. It's designed to keep the subject in a state of perpetual engagement, which one may characterize as a sort of form of a modern political cult, a cult of the system, an imperial cult, you could say. And so engagement is the lifeblood of the economy, of the sign economy. And thus, without that consistency of interaction and that persistence of interaction, the value of the government and, of course, the various faux symbols surrounding that government, which ultimately now make up their institutions, their hollow institutions, all of that would collapse. And so, therefore, the system doesn't necessarily care what you say, it only cares that you are speaking into it. The system gives you the megaphone. In fact, the system is the megaphone. It only wants you to provide the data necessary for its continued expansion. So it's effectively a gossip mill. It is attention farming you, because as long as you maintain focus upon it, you make it real. So this gets into the idea of hyperstition, which we will touch upon very, very soon. So if the state simply dictates a narrative to you, your natural instinct to resist kicks in. But if the state provides, say, I don't know, a puzzle, right, an ARG, or of course a PSYOP in terms of the facile normative population, as opposed to the ARG, which would be more along the lines and advertised or marketed to the dissident population. So that this puzzle, which is a seemingly forbidden mystery involving this Hilton hotel event, right? Um, this high profile press event, and of course the assassination attempt, and the shadowy agent behind it, and potential time machine um, goings on and time travel. The, of course, most internet sleuths will seek to solve it. They will see it as a challenge, and they will accept such a challenge. And so here is the dark brilliance of the ARG. People will defend to the death a reality they believe. So this is the dark brilliance of the ARG, and it goes as follows: that people will defend to the death a reality they believe they have uncovered themselves. So this is why you have to be constantly self-critical and review your own beliefs and understand the limitations of human reason. This is why I've been consistently speaking on this for, well, God, probably the past, I would say, 2 months in terms of all of my videos and discussions. So, like all hyperstitions, which is the engine of history itself, through the vehicle of perception, the cognitive capture of their mind through mass formation, they, the population, shall breathe life into the lie and by consequence render it as real. This is where you get into the simulacra and simulation and the death of the real. So by designing this as an interactive game, at least for the conspiratorial circles, the intelligence apparatus achieves total cognitive capture. The system becomes so totalized and it actually commodifies its own critique. So they force us into a state of compulsive engagement through this. We stop asking why the geopolitical structures are failing, what's going on. We stop asking who's profiting from the perma crisis. Instead, we spend thousands of hours decoding the digital exhaust left behind by the friendly federal assassin. We become hamsters running on an esoteric wheel designed by Langley. We do the heavy lifting of building their mythos for them. We literally prop up the system vis-a-vis our attention. And why the Hilton? Why the White House press dinner? Well, in terms of the ARG, this also can be applied to the general Psyop of the assassination attempt itself. It requires a spectacular anchor, a spectacular temporal anchor, to bridge the digital simulation with the physical reality. The press dinner is the ultimate symbol of the incestuous relationship between media and state power. It's sort of tangibly ironic in a sense. So it is pure concentrated spectacle because we persist and exist within an empire of spectacle. So by initiating the sort of glitch in that specific room and with that specific event in front of the very people whose job it is to write the first draft of history, they ensured the virus would spread globally in milliseconds. The event was the inciting incident. It permanently blurred the line between physical geopolitical reality and the digital maze they have since, I would say, the 2010s trapped us inside. So, what is the ultimate objective? Why turn a political event into a dark participatory game? Well, it is to elevate worldly powers to the status of literal reality benders. We're going to get into why this is and uh, the sort of details of this Henry Martinez connection, this looking glass connection, this plasma time machine, all of these connections. We'll get into this. So when the public realizes or even suspects that events at this scale are highly scripted, interactive illusions, it induces a profound state of learned helplessness. The objective isn't to convince us of a specific lie, it is to exhaust our capacity to discern the truth altogether and to subtly apotheosize the very system itself. So they are socially priming us, they are testing our ability to effectively write the timeline for them by the insertion of little phantom characters like Henry Martinez, Cole Thomas Allen, the AI CCTV footage, the blurry CCTV footage. And from there, they watch as the populace frantically weaves it into a grand design, a lattice of their own prisonic cell. So we are no longer citizens reacting to the news anymore, or to the false events, the staged crises. We are players trapped in a massive multiplayer psychological operation. We are feeding our attention, our dread, and our intellect directly into the engine of the very power structures we think we are exposing. They want the active intellect to actively resist, because by doing so, you focus upon them, in a sense. And they want you to be completely ensconced and assimilated, taken over by these alternate reality games that they place within these events. So they built the maze, they dropped the cheese, and we ran the labyrinth exactly as prefigured. The chaos as well that we see now, the political violence, the rapid shifts in reality, the transitional geopolitical situation, the constant outrage, war around every corner, the brow of every hill contains a crisis. It is the necessary fuel for the informational age. The time machine of the modern attention economy requires us to be constantly perturbed, constantly engaged, constantly excited, constantly aroused, constantly terrified. When we engage with weaponized apophenia, spending hours connecting dots between assassins, Henry Martinez, the looking glass technology, time machines, time travel. Have we went into a multiverse, a different timeline, and of course particle colliders? We're actually giving away our vital organic energy, our attention to the machine. I'm almost encouraging you to think along these lines that are we voluntarily stepping into the battery farm that powers the system itself vis-a-vis this? This is something to think on, right? Of course, we speak about these things speculatively on this channel, but spending hours and hours and hours of our life, thousands of hours of our life, looking at this content, is it helping us? Is it aiding in our own individual emancipation? Is it engendering and galvanizing our own sovereignty, our own agency? Or is it, in fact, diminishing it? Is it designed to diminish it? These are things to think on. So, several reasons as well why they did it. So, Trump has low poll numbers. It was also to pass the entire project of the ballroom extension to the White House, which is interesting. What's going on with that? And moreover, as well, you saw a few clips which we will play of Erica Kirk. She, of course, starts crying and says, I just want to go home. So again, it's creating a narrative around her, which elicits sympathy. Thus, it may increase her popularity as well. TPUSA, in fact, is I mean, it's precipitously losing its supporters. It is hemorrhaging support across the board, and thus it requires these events to sort of, bump up their numbers and to stabilize and shore up their popularity. So, a recent ruling by US District Judge Richard Leon from late March, which halted the construction of Trump's planned $400 million White House ballroom until explicit congressional authorization is given. The judge's ruling included an exception that only allowed construction strictly necessary for our safety and security, such as underground bunkers. So in mid-April, the judge reiterated the halt on above-ground construction, rejecting the administration's attempt to bypass the ruling by classifying the entire project as a national security matter. And interestingly, of course, on what was it, the 25th, you had this event, very convenient timing. So the incident was clearly used as a pretext, prompting people to tweet about the necessity of the new ballroom for quote-unquote safety in an attempt to bypass the judge's ruling and continue the construction by manufacturing a need based on a staged crisis. So we'll get into the Henry Martinez thing shortly, but I want to play a few interesting videos. But before we get to that, I want to cover a few little images that I have here. So the first is a quote. So this is by C.S. Lewis. He stated, quote, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience." And moreover, as well, this ties into safety and security and humanitarianism, which is the tyrant's best friend. It is the tyrant's go-to guise for passing all of his various agendas by these duplicitous means. So N. Rockefeller stated, quote, "By having this war on terror, you can never win it. So you can always be, you can always keep taking people's liberties away. the media can convince everybody that it's real, unquote. So the original definition of the word terrorism is from the French terrorisme and referred specifically to state terrorism as practiced by the French government during the 1793 to 1794 reign of terror. Jump forward 140 years, and the concise Oxford Dictionary of 1934 still had a terrorist defined as, quote, one who favours or uses terror inspiring methods of governing, unquote. No one is denying that radical individuals and groups commit atrocities. However, the above definition aptly highlights what some people have been suggesting for years, that the biggest and most frequent sponsor of terrorism is, in fact, the state. While this concept may be totally alien to many law-abiding citizens, especially those living within supposedly freer societies, it is, alas, an unpalatable but provable truth, unquote, quote, pardon. By any measure, the US has long used terrorism. In 1978 to 79, the Senate was trying to pass a law against international terrorism. In every version they produced, the lawyers said the US would be in violation, unquote. That was said by Lieutenant General William Odom, director of the National Security Agency under Ronald Reagan. But this doesn't just apply to the overt variety. State terrorism is the cornerstone of the deep state. If a terrorist group doesn't exist, it is standard practice for the security services to encourage or create one. Operation Gladio showed how, for example, NATO and the CIA operatives had been killing numerous innocent people in Europe via terrorist bombing campaigns for decades, purely for political reasons. This includes the 1980 Bologna train station massacre that killed 81 people and wounded over 200, all part of the strategy of tension. These covert but officially sanctioned terrorist attacks were intended to manipulate public opinion through the use of fear. Both Giulio Andreotti, ex-Prime Minister of Italy, and General Giandelio Maletti, a former head of Italian counterintelligence, have confirmed Operation Gladio's existence. So, Alan Sabrowski, former director of studies at the US Army War College, 30th of March 2010, stated, quote, it is 100% certain that the events of 2001 was a Mossad operation, period. The Zs are playing this as an all or nothing exercise. If they lose this one, they're done, unquote. So, but these attacks, oh, it goes on to state on the other page, but these attacks were not restricted to Italy. Many other European countries were targeted, including Belgium in 1985, where 28 shoppers were killed and many more injured. Investigations linked the attack to SDRA-8, SDRA-6, Belgian Gendarmerie, and DIA, the Pentagon Secret Service Intelligence Agency. But why would the state or a department within it attack its own citizens? Vincenzo Vinciguerra, who was convicted of murder in one of these Gladio operations, spills the beans. Quote, you were supposed to attack civilians, women and children, innocent people, for one simple reason, to force the public to turn to the state and ask for greater security, unquote. I would urge readers to etch Vinciguerra's statement permanently into their memory, because terrorism is the bogeyman that the powers that shouldn't be use to keep the masses fearful and in check. Anon stated, quote, the easiest way to gain control of a population is to carry out acts of terror. The public will clamour for such laws if their personal security is threatened, unquote. So we have seen that some in government and other communities love nothing better than pretending to attack themselves. It has proved to be a fantastic way to generate sympathy, or it was in the past. I think a lot of people are starting to see through it, unquote. Miles Mathis, 27th of October, 2018. This appears to be a generalized sort of how-to, a 20-step plan for these types of staged crises. 1. Drills occur that mimic the actual situation, often on the same day. 2. Passport or ID of perpetrator found at the scene. 3. CCTV not working. 4. Prescience, foreknowledge of the event. 5. Evidence of multiple shooters. By the way, for number 4, pardon, we actually see Caroline Levitt clearly show foreknowledge of the event, but we'll get to that later. 5. Evidence of multiple shooters, not just a lone wolf, Patsy has claimed. 6. Eyewitness accounts conflict with the official story. 7. Video photo evidence doesn't fit the narrative. 8. Images have been tampered with. 9. Immediate responsibility for the act assigned via a prepared narrative. 10. Standard protocols not followed. 11. Perpetrator has links with the intelligence services. 12. Key witness, Alt F4's existence. 13. Inadvertent admission of responsibility by third party, slip of the tongue phrase. 14. Physical evidence hidden, removed, and or disposed of with due haste. 15. Obvious symbology, numerology used. 16. Shout of allegiance in public. Number 15, by the way, that's utilized again for the ARG purpose, the alternate reality game, because they're trying to generate engagement from the dissident population. However, there's also there's a sort of alternate reality game going on there within their own elite circles. This symbolism and numerology is almost like gang tagging, like gang signs that are left at the scene of the crime. It's fingerprints. They're utilized to sort of build zeal and a sort of fervent loyalty through the transgressive act, this sort of criminal fraternity, which really defines all secret societies and cults and mystery schools. That is what underpins that. So 16, shout of allegiance in public. 17, use of crisis actors, aka controlled witnesses, or of course controlled perpetrators as well. 18, a building or company involved was recently sold or purchased. 19, insurance policy changed. 20, call for removal of freedoms, civil liberties in the aftermath. So to indicate whether an incident is likely to be a staged event requires only 1 or 2 points on this list to be valid. This list does not cover all the indicators, but is sufficient for our needs. Some of the points are self-evident and need no explanation, but several are not, and therefore worthy of further analysis. So now on to the videos.
One more thing. Somebody caught this guy. I don't know who this guy is. He's sitting on the dais, and there's a shooting happening, and let's watch what he does. You can turn it down. Well, so there they go. They're running over, and he just starts taking pictures. There's an active shooter. They took out J.D. Vance. Now they're going over to get, and he's just taking pictures. There's a lot of people doing that. Here's one more thing I want to show you. Here's a lady who's going to tell you, I got this from Baron Coleman's show, that she saw the guy in a side room where they carry catering carts, and he went in there. There was a security guy in there with a dog, and he takes out his gun and puts it together. Let's watch.
Yeah, and everyone was pretty much in, and a lot of people had already gone. We were doing dinner breaks in shifts. Yeah. And I was just out there. There was no security there, and I was even talking to a security guard that had a dog there. Yeah. And there's a room, well, it was like a makeshift room. I think they had it closed off to wheel in the bar carts after the reception. All these numerous bar carts going into this area, I think, to go in the elevator or downstairs. Okay. So it looked like a makeshift room. I mean, he was literally from me to that building, and there was a security guy there too. I mean, I don't think anyone knew what he was doing.
Describe it. Where do you look? So let me just position what's going on here. She says there's a little room that they were using to store bar carts. This alleged shooter goes in the room, and it's just right there. And she said there's a security guy there too.
Yeah.
And there's a dog, presumably, some sort of law enforcement dog. I doubt it's just a schnauzer wandering around the lobby of the Washington Hilton, or why else would she mention it?
Okay.
So you have presumably a security guy, some sort of security dog, all present, all accounted for. And there's no explanation at this point for why the guy is not being stopped from what he's doing. I'm going to let her continue, but I just wanted to set that stage for you so you can hear this next
in
part.
post, cut out Baron Coleman, because I already said what he said.
I'm not even sure what he looks like.
And what made you think he's the shooter? How do you know he's the guy?
I saw him put the gun together and start shooting.
So what makes...
So there was a security guy there in this little makeshift room where they're keeping the bar carts. She's there. The shooter's there. He takes the gun out and puts it together. And the security guard doesn't do anything? Okay. There you go. All right, let's get
this out.
This speech tonight will be classic Donald J. Trump. It'll be funny. It'll be entertaining. There will be some shots fired tonight in the room.
So Caroline Leavitt literally says that during Donald Trump's speech will be fired, which in itself is interesting. But check this out.
Quickly tell you, I was sitting next to Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary's husband. He was seated right next to me, and then he kind of leaned over and said, you know, I watched you on TV, you do a great job. You need to be very safe. And he was just very serious when he said that to me. And he kind of looked around the room and he said, you know, there are some...
They cut her phone off. They stopped her from talking live on air. And this is the person who allegedly did this. Now, what's absolutely wild, that this random account, Henry Martinez, joined X on December 2023 and tweeted out one name, Cole, on December 21st, 2023. I took this screenshot myself and leave it to Trump to close it out and say, let the show go on. But we're not done, because my good friend Voice, who I'll tag in the description, pointed this out. Because there's a motive.
And I will say, you know, it's not a particularly secure building. I didn't want to say this, but this is why we have to have all of the attributes of what we're planning at the White House. It's actually a larger room, and it's much more secure. It's drone-proof, it's bulletproof glass. We need the ballroom. That's why Secret Service, that's why the military are demanding it.
The White House East Wing Ballroom project, where Donald Trump fired the McCreary architects and replaced them with Shalom Bernis Associates. This ballroom, the one that has the blueprint that looks exactly like Solomon's Temple. And what does Shalom Bernis Associates have experience with? Doing multiple synagogue renovations. Renovating temples. And you remember America Reads the Bible 2026, a historic call to return to God's Word that literally finished today, where Donald Trump read the Bible. And he specifically read 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verses 11 through 22. So what does 2 Chronicles chapter 7 deal with? The dedication of the temple, where the Lord appears to Solomon after Solomon finished building the temple, and the Lord gave him a vision, saying, when I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command the locusts to devour the land, or send plagues among my people, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sins. This is what Donald Trump read. And so is this a play to get the third temple built? I don't know. We'll see. But as Trump said, let the show go on. God bless you and Godspeed. I'll see you next time.
So what we've got to do is just hit, and keep it. It's momentum. The opposition party is the media. And the media can only, because they're dumb and they're lazy, they can only focus on one thing at a time. And the one thing they'll mainly focus on is either they do the horse race, or once the horse race, who's in, who's out. Right. It's like the high school, who are the cool kids in the cafeteria, right? Because it's easy. It's the reason they do the horse race stuff all the time, right? And they won't do the basic, what are the core things that are going on in the country? I said, all we have to do is flood the zone. Every day we hit them with 3 things. They'll bite on one and we'll get all of our stuff done. Bang, bang, bang. These guys will never be able to recover, but we got to start with muzzle velocity. So it's got to start, it's got to hammer, it's got to muzzle velocity. You got it when you get anything in life. Remember, the house is 5 to 7 against, right? To get something done, you've got to go through these certain stages of momentum and keep forcing it.
Of AI. Look at the people disappear, carrying pizza boxes over here, disappearing through. Look at this person on the ground. Watch this person on the ground with us. This is fun AI shit. Look at just laying here. This pizza box guy's coming in. Disappears with the pizza box. There, this guy's carrying a pizza box all of a sudden. Look at. This is how you know AI is fake. Where you watch it all. This guy disappears. Oh yeah. The funniest part is this officer. What's he doing on his knees on the ground? Look at this guy. Look, he's on the ground. What's going on here? Anyways, this guy is tackling nobody. It was a pizza box. Like, what is happening? This is so fake. Anyways, AI, it even says AI. Okay.
And they're also calling for restrictions to be placed on, it would appear, freedom of speech as well.
Read the manifesto of this shooter. Ask yourselves, how different is the rhetoric from this almost assassin than what you read on social media and hear in various forums every single day? The answer, if you're being honest with yourself, is that there is no difference at all. Much of the manifesto of the would-be assassin is indistinguishable from the words that we hear daily from so many.
Art, you're crazy. Every banana republic in the world has a Bill of Rights. Every president for life has a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights of the former evil empire, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, was much better than ours. I mean it literally. It was much better. We guarantee freedom of speech and of the press. Big deal. They guaranteed freedom of the speech, of the press, of street demonstrations and protests, and anyone who is caught trying to suppress criticism of the government will be called to account. Whoa, that is wonderful stuff. Of course. Just words on paper. What our framers would have called a parchment guarantee. And the reason is that the real constitution of the Soviet Union, you think of the word constitution, it doesn't mean a bill, it means structure. Say a person has a sound constitution, has a sound structure. The real constitution of the Soviet Union, which is what our framers debated that whole summer in Philadelphia in 1787. They didn't talk about the Bill of Rights. That was an afterthought, wasn't it? That constitution of the Soviet Union did not prevent the centralization of power in one person or in one party. And when that happens, the game is over. The Bill of Rights is just what our framers would call a parchment guarantee. So the real key to the distinctiveness of America is the structure of our government. One part of it, of course, is the independence of the judiciary. But there's a lot more. There are very few countries in the world, for example, that have a bicameral legislature. Oh, England has a House of Lords for the time being, but the House of Lords has no substantial power. They can just make the Commons pass a bill a second time. France has a Senate, it's honorific. Italy has a Senate, it's honorific. Very few countries have two separate bodies in the legislature equally powerful. That's a lot of trouble, as you gentlemen doubtless know, to get the same language through two different bodies elected in a different fashion. Very few countries in the world have a separately elected chief executive. Sometimes I go to Europe to talk about separation of powers. And when I get there, I find that all I'm talking about is independence of the judiciary. Because the Europeans don't even try to divide the two political powers, the two political branches, the legislature and the chief executive. In all of the parliamentary countries, the chief executive is the creature of the legislature. There's never any disagreement between them and the prime minister, as there is sometimes between you and the president. When there's a disagreement, they just kick him out. They have a no confidence vote, a new election, and they get a prime minister who agrees with the legislature.
I just want to go find I just want to go find
So we'll now touch upon this very interesting Henry Martinez connection, and of course, I would say this is a fine example of ARG, the alternate reality game, and its use as an informational warfare instrument. So Henry Martinez on Twitter or X, the account header featured pareidolia art of the iconic Butler assassination attempt seen on Trump, implying that he knew about both assassination attempts months, years before they happened. The Distinct Mind releases artwork October 28th, 2021. This is this pareidolia artwork. The Time Machine site features artwork May 5th, 2022. Henry Martinez, his X account created December 2023. Butler assassination attempt in Pennsylvania was July 13th, 2024. White House Correspondents' Dinner assassination attempt April 25th, 2026. So, again, it would appear either they're time travelers or all of this is completely scripted, right? I would go with the latter, but... So Henry Martinez posted Cole Allen back on 12/21/2023. The profile banner photo Henry used for his X account is the exact same photo a company called Time Machine. It's actually, I believe, an organization, a part of the European Union, called Time Machine. Used for an event back on May 5th, 2022. Note that the event was prior to Henry creating his X account. So as you can see here, it's pareidolia. Exactly. And you'll notice the bullet hole is actually at the left side of Trump's head. Interestingly too, we had Isaac Cappy mentioned 12/21/2.
12/21, take it away. Epstein Island burns away.
So it's quite a short clip, but Another interesting thing. I also mentioned regarding 1221 and the connections with Armin. And I think it was the iPet Goat. It was the iPet Goat 2 a discussion just recently, episode 8. And I want you to notice in this that it almost feels like an action movie. The way that they're talking, they're just it looks like something out of Call of Duty. It looks like a LARP, a live action role play. So check this out.
Where's it coming from? Over there. Where's it coming from? What's the crossfire? Look out!
Bro, somebody go.
Everybody stay down, stay down. We got one down. Jim!
What the? Oh my God!
Stay down, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, stay down. Where's that at? He's inside, he's not inside. Nobody comes in here.
So as you can see, everyone is filming. They do not care about their own safety. You've got a supposed assassination attempt. You've got guns here, there, and everywhere. Every single deadly weapon you can imagine, perhaps bar, drones and ballistic missiles are in this vicinity. However, at this critical juncture of the emergency, not knowing what the hell's going on, the first thing they do is they just start filming everything. Standing. It's because it's a spectacle. We live within an empire of spectacle. People now fundamentally define their society by content. That's all they care about. They're like little social media influencer hamsters running upon their localized wheel. Arguably, technologically, we've never been so connected in terms of the telecommunicative devices that we have at our disposal and all of the various means of communication that provides us. And we've never been so connected technologically, but on a human level, we're entirely disconnected from everyone else. It's a total inversion. And when I say most governments nowadays, not on force, they're not extending and projecting their power vis-a-vis force and authority and the sort of guise of authority in this legitimization through it. They actually legitimize themselves through psychological governance. The primary example is that of the spectacle, the theatre of the absurd. That this is, they are literally terraforming the cognitive terrain of the masses through these types of events. It primes the public to fall into patterns of behavior that the system finds, I guess the term would be congenial to their, or amiable to their interests, and of course, as well, focus upon the system itself. So the system is almost like another competing influencer upon the social media platform, the stage. And this is what these spectacles are fundamentally about.
President's been shot. Oh no. No. Either that or they're covering. We don't know. Either that or they're covering him. We love you. We love you, President Trump. We love you. We love you, President Trump. We love you. Yes. 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 We love you, President Trump. No. No, stop.
So as you can see, the whole thing was completely staged. So we'll go into the looking glass technology now. And this is a video with David Wilcock. Now, this sort of underpins, a contextual landscape that has been mired in assassinations of ufologists and plasma scientists. And of course, what are they hiding, right? What is this looking glass technology? Can the government, can they truly bend the timelines? Can they bend reality itself? And of course, if they can manipulate time and space, then de facto they become God. If they can make you believe that they can bend time and space, they effectively are making you believe that they are God. Thus, it brings you into a state, subconsciously, unwittingly, of learned helplessness, which is, of course, the primary objective.
Today is the very first public unveiling in a public presentation of Project Looking Glass. A human being is about this tall. This is built in underground bases. It is colossal in size. And what happens is when you fire this thing up, these rings start going in all different directions. It shields off the barrel of water inside, which is just like your pineal gland. The water inside flips over into time-space, which then captures argon gas, captures visual images, and this is what it looks like. It becomes huge, glowing, all the way out to these posts, which are used as stabilizers for the energy field. Now, it doesn't start out with an image of the Earth. That's just there as a placeholder, although you could see the whole Earth like that if you wanted to. That's not usually what happens. Well, contact, right? We have been given the technology right in front of our faces in the movies. They just don't tell you what it's for. In what? 13 Ghosts? Well, thank you. I'll have to check that one out. Doesn't sound like a movie I'd want to see, but if it's for that, oh, I can imagine. So, Contact, just to recap from yesterday, blueprints come in from the Vegans, from Vega. They figure out that it's only when you fold up these patterns into a cube, which forms what there in the center, the triangle with the eye in the middle, as it folds up, cube geometry, that's when you can decode the plans to build this, these rings, which becomes this machine. And there's your little helicopter. So there's another shot of it. They got computer animations of how it's going to work with the different...
So just to make clear, this is the sort of time machine connection. And this will tie into Henry Martinez and his Twitter handle, because the numbers in front of that Twitter handle, at Henry Ma 79561893, can actually be itself turned into coordinates, and it provides you a position in the middle of Svalbard in the Arctic Circle. Moreover, as well, Cole Allen is also an anagram for a lone cell, which I found interesting. I found that out some days ago.
Rings moving. This actually looks like the fisheye lens distortion effect that happens around the looking glass when you power it on. There's a gantry crane up at the top, and the little guy is dropped down and goes inside. That's like your barrel inside the mechanism there. And this is where all the action happens. This is where the Stargate opens, the wormhole into the higher realms. In this frame, we're seeing how the whole thing collapsed and fell apart. So, of course, you want to take a ride. You know, the new the new formation of the one after the old one breaks. And here we're seeing the new one. Once again, you get a very clear view, and there's your little eye with the rays coming off it, just like the all-seeing eye on the dollar. Not surprising. Here she is. It's even larger than the real one, standing on this ladder, looking down inside. This is the chamber and the chair inside, which we'll see is very important. And here's your geometry. Look at that. Did anybody notice that when you were watching the movie? Because it goes by pretty fast. That's that same geometry that's in the background radiation of the whole universe with the sphere in the center. They fire it up. Guess what happens? Big, bright luminosity, just like the real thing. The real thing that they're actually using and have been using since the 40s at least. And here's what it looked like from the control room. It gets brighter and brighter, and then she starts having the floor disappear. She gets dropped down inside, and then, of course, she goes through this wild wormhole ride, and there's an ascension experience at the end of the dream. The Iraq War had, to a large degree, the mission of capturing a looking glass technology that was dug up in Sumer, which was originally in the possession of Gaddafi in Libya, which is why they attacked Libya. Gaddafi got rid of it and gave it to Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was using this technology, viewing the future. The U.S. government went in after him because they felt that the fate of the world was at stake, because if they did not capture this technology and get it back and deconstruct it, that the Earth would have a pole shift. But when you actually decipher these letters, it means the doctrine of the convergent timeline paradox. Here's the problem. You look through time with this device, and when you hit 2012, everything goes perfectly white. As you get closer and closer to 2012, starting in around 1980, a very strange thing has been happening when they use the looking glass. There is an interlacing of images. So right now, imagine that if I had this slide on half the time, and then the other half of the time, there was an image of like a face. And if I interlace them slowly, then maybe every second it goes from here to the face to here to the face. Then as it speeds up, it gets faster and faster to the point that if it were complex images, you couldn't make out one from the other because they're flip-flopping so fast, okay? That's called interlacing, and the frequency of the interlacing gets higher and higher as you go towards 2012. So anytime that they try to look at, like, or they used to try to look because they're not using them anymore, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, bam. It's so interlaced that they have a whole server farm of computers just to deconstruct the two images and be able to see what they're looking at in the future. So again, this is what they're using. This is one of the main ones they're using, the Orion Cube as they call it, or the Cube. And also it's being used with looking glass. But what's going on with 2012? Well, here's another very interesting thing. We have multiple parallel futures that we can choose. And 2012 literally does represent create your own reality time. It has everything to do with what do you expect is going to happen. This is where thoughts becoming reality really takes on a whole new meaning in a way that you've never heard of before. So what they found that was so bizarre was that at December 21st, 2012, they could calculate it down to the day, that's how precise this was, that for some reason all the graphs, all the waves would go into a complete flat line. They no longer moved up and down like before. They went flat for like 7 or 8 seconds. So then they're asking the guys that went through these stargates and were traveling into the future, what happened to you? Every single time that somebody tried to hit 2012, they said the same thing. There was this thing they called the bump. It actually hits you like a bump. You actually feel like you've slammed into something. And as soon as it slams into you, you have the most incredible religious experience you can imagine. Cosmic consciousness. Your consciousness just blasts into this wonderful place where you have awareness of no space, no time. All knowledge is available to you. Ecstatic God consciousness. You could be the galaxy. You could be a subatomic particle. You can go everywhere, do everything, and there's no sense of it ever ending. So when it finally stops, you just can't even believe that you're back to who you were before.
Like what happened to Jodie Foster?
Exactly what happens to Jodie Foster in Contact. So,
Is that the moment of no time?
that's the zero time, yeah. And Daniel doesn't agree with me on this, but I believe that 2012 is our zero time reference. And when you hit 2012, everything goes perfectly white.
concerning something called the Guardians of the Looking Glass. Basically, what we had here is a technology that was built which would give those people who operated that technology, of course, a huge advantage because they could see and view timelines within a stream within a 51.
The program out at Area S4 consisted of 3 projects: Project Galileo, Project Sidekick, and Project Looking Glass.
They were attacking to go to the museums to find that out. Yes, absolutely.
Like Saddam Hussein.
Computer, did the ship just conduct a trajectory correction maneuver? Or are we beginning an orbital insertion? Affirmative. So we're slowing down. Which means we're approaching a destination. Identify our destination. Authorization required.
Well, he had technology. He had hold of technology. He had hold of Stargate technology. That's one of the reasons why he was at one point, he was one of the most powerful men on the planet. And the technology that he had was off the charts.
This is very similar to what John Irwin has said in his book, One Step Beyond the 16.
Yes, yeah.
Amongst other things.
Yes, he had that. It's sort of similar to there's a movie called Contact, and that spinning thing there, which is able to shoot you through to different dimensions. So he had something similar to that. There's a few of them around, but he had control of that.
Separation of the cone from these 3 stars. Okay, display a cone of 23.5 degree half angle. Also display the
Never. He just said artifacts, ancient artifacts that were so important, we had to get them, and we got them.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got them.
Some of you might know me because of a story I broke last March concerning something called the Guardians of the Looking Glass. Basically, what we had here is a technology that was built which would give those people who operated that technology, of course, a huge advantage because they could see and view timelines within a stream, within a field. You know, the awareness of this technology came to us through certain whistleblowers, and one of them was a guy by the name of Dan Burish, who went into some detail about how that technology was acquired. It starts at the end of the Second World War. It was the first time that the United States ever came into contact with certain ETs, you could say, who began appearing over the skies of the United States. And their appearance, again, was accompanied by crashes and captures of both the craft and the pilots piloting that craft. And it leads directly to the formation of the breakaway civilization, that which was created by one ultra secret society that was called Majestic 12. They who have ultimately come into possession of the Looking Glass material and time travel and other technologies ever since. So between 1947 and the early 50s, there were a series of crashes that took place, not just one, and they started the whole back engineering process. And they also had captured extraterrestrial beings. And the Looking Glass has ended up in S4 Area 51.
The program out at Area S4 consisted of 3 projects: Project Galileo, Project Sidekick, and Project Looking Glass. Project Galileo dealt with gravity propulsion. Project Sidekick dealt with a beam weapon that had a neutron source and was focused by a gravity lens. Project Looking Glass dealt with the physics of seeing back in time.
What they really discovered, in principle, is that the ETs are not really truly ETs. They're us from the future. They called them J-rods.
A long period of introduction into needing, say an ABE, an alien. I call them J-Rod, of course that's what they call him, but that wasn't his, I don't know if that was his real name or not. That's the name that the linguist gave him. So he knew J-Rod.
Came from Zeta Reticuli, which is what we are going to colonize in the future. And they traveled back 52,000 and 45,000 years respectively.
State line of order, John? Okay, yesterday you told us you traveled, and I quote, thousands of light years to get here. Yes. Sort of human.
To exactly before this time, before this event takes place, for different reasons. What they found was that there are 3 types of beings. There's 2 J-rods, which were called P-52s. The P-52s were for 52,000 years in the future, and the P-45s were from 45,000 years in the future. And the P-45s weren't interested in helping us. They were just here to harvest genetic materials which they had lost over the course of tens of thousands of years of exposure. The P-52s also returned because they came back and they were trying to tell us our consciousness can affect our timeline. Not just the timeline, but also cosmic events. They were trying to tell us that the cosmic event, which is about to happen, can be affected by our collective consciousness. It's going to play out in 2 ways. It could end up with a timeline that prevails that's an organic timeline, where mankind will begin to wake up and en masse, and that we will change the trajectory of that course by raising our consciousness, and then there's going to be some event, and our change in consciousness will actually set in motion a positive version of how that event affects us. We've heard about ancient civilizations like Atlantis or Lemuria or Mu, and they come and go. They always seem to end in some huge cataclysm or some destruction, some destructive event happens, society blows up. It's like a loop. Eventually, it would have to crack that loop. So maybe here is the chance to actually break that loop. And the other timeline they were talking about that may prevail is this transhumanist timeline. Along comes 2022, and it's been like 10 years since the last Looking Glass whistleblowers had been out there talking about it, Dan Bush and a few others. But this suddenly appeared, this group calling themselves the Guardians of the Looking Glass. We are the Guardians of the Looking Glass. We're a group of former intelligence officers and military officials who have come together to release classified information about future events to come. Our knowledge comes from our work on the Looking Glass artifact, first discovered in Iraq. During this time, the artifact was activated by the U.S. military and connected to computers. We were able to see dozens of future timelines and the convergent singularities that led to 2 possible outcomes by the year 2030. In one outcome, humanity awakens and the current order is dismantled, and an event occurs, and instead of this event being negative, it is a positive one. In the other outcome, the current structure remains in place, a nuclear war takes place along with many horrible events, then the event occurs, and instead of being a positive event, it's a negative one.
So that's the sort of general gist of the idea that you're seeing there. The reason for the toroid as well, by the way, at least esoterically speaking, if we, for example, this is from my decoding or breakdown, my analysis, my esoteric analysis of the film Vivarium. So the figure of 8 is the minimum orbital pattern of a toroidal moment. You can find that with Martin Fleischmann's work. It's on YouTube. Very interesting. He also goes into the Saturn square and some decodings of that, translations, of course, of the Saturn Repotenet Opera Rotas. He mentions it probably means the soar. The soar repeat, so A rep O, A repeatedly to O. So the soar from the beginning repeatedly to the end, recursively ad infinitum, creates the world vis-a-vis the whirlwind, or of course the toroid, hence in English world, right? Which of course is phonetically or in terms of pronunciation, it's homophonous to that of WHIRLED, world. So we're whirled around the world. So the shape of the trap, a torus which looks like a donut or an hourglass when viewed in cross-section, is a self-sustaining closed loop energy field. Energy flows out from the center, loops around the perimeter, and is sucked violently back into the bottom hole. This is also related to Loosh. So yonder, the place in Vivarium, is a toroidal field. is a simulation. It's a simulated environment. It's therefore a toroidal field. It is a perfectly sealed hermetic system where no energy can escape. Tom and Gemma, the two main characters, are the positive and negative poles of this torus, red and blue, active resistance and passive emotionality. So the friction of their suffering generates the energy, which loops through the artificial environment and is fed directly into the singularity at the center, which, in the case of the film, is the archontic child, the next generation of the brood parasitic Martian or Martin race. And in the samsaric figure 8, so this conception of the toroidal field. So if one lays the hourglass on its side and it becomes the symbol for infinity. This is the samsaric wheel. The archons trap humans. This is the idea that you see both in Vivarium and the Gnostic cosmology. They trap human souls in this infinite looping geometry, which is 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional. Of course, remember, Trump as well is playing 4D or 5D chess, right? We've heard that, which is very interesting terminology in light of this, and in light of this sort of growing looking glass psyop. So ensuring a continuous supply of power. We have the idea of the toroidal harvest as well. So the faceless male and female, Tom and Gemma, this is in the book of the aliens in Vivarium, their sort of manual that they provide to the child. Those flanking the child with the hourglass toroidal symbols on their heads, they are positioned below the viral payload. So the virus uses the child's form as an anchor, and the child uses or the alien rather, and the child uses the humans as the thermodynamic battery to sustain the alien, the virus's existence in our dimension. So the virus, which is the top of the toroid, which in the case of Vivarium would be a sort of inorganic plasma alien, which requires kinetic and emotional energy to survive and to mature. The vector, which is the crux or the middle of the toroid, that replicates and injects its payload into a biological human mimicking vessel. And in the bottom, which is the harvest, the vessel, the child, also this is found with Isis, Osiris, and Horus. Horus, of course, is the child. Funnily enough as well, we were mentioning that the aliens are called Martins. Well, Martin itself comes from Mars. That's where it derives from. Mars itself is an abbreviation of Marvor. Marvor, which literally means the master of the cut, and was associated with an agricultural deity, and then eventually come the abbreviation with Mars. It became a more militaristic deity, similar to the Hellenic Ares. However, that itself goes further back to an Etruscan deity known as Maris, and that was called the Eternal Child. It was referred to as the Eternal Child. So this is the Horus motif that you see also crop up in Vivarium. And the Eternal Child is effectively the systems of power themselves in terms of a metaphorical delineation of how they maintain power. We're going to get into this with Athanasius Kircher very soon. Anyway, so here is the 3-step process applied strictly to an empire of spectacle and modern intelligence psyops, right? So the engine of the top, this is the quote-unquote virus, right? The thing that's seeking infiltration and to be nurtured and matured within the consciousness of mankind. So, of course, mankind and its mind itself can be utilized as a perceptual vehicle to project that quote-unquote informational or ideological virus onto reality itself, and then eventually that virus, the lie, becomes the truth through mass formation of it. So the modern geopolitical apparatus, the intelligence community, the algorithmic media, the corporate state, is an engine that runs exclusively on attention and division. It has no and this is what you see in Vivarium as well, they divide the male and the female. They keep them very separate throughout the entirety of the film. It has no intrinsic moral center. It is a mechanism of pure self-preservation to justify its budgets, its surveillance powers, and its authority. It requires a populace that is perpetually anxious, endlessly distracted, and culturally fractured. It needs a permanent state of crisis to legitimize its control. The second stage, which is the stage at the crux of the toroid, which would be the vector, the eye of the hourglass. The state cannot simply dictate fear, right? The public is too cynical for top-down propaganda. Instead, it must show them a movie. The event at the Washington Hilton, for example, which saw the assassin Cole Thomas Allen, glaringly, obvious security loopholes. The manifesto sent 10 minutes prior. It covers all the sort of Operation Gladio boxes. It's all an engineered payload. So it is a piece of interactive theatre. By staging this at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, they placed the anomaly squarely at the epicenter of the media machine. Ironically, too. So that event was designed to be anomalous. That wasn't a failure. It's not a failure. This was the execution of the script. They're designing it to flood. They're designing it to flood the zone. So the mistakes, like not checking luggage, for example, were deliberately left in the open as plot devices for the public to find, thus to bring them in to the rabbit hole, to the vortex, to the toroid of the system. And again, they get locked into cycles of compulsive engagement. And in the capture at the bottom, this would be the harvest, right? So the spectacle is released to the public. The political left and right are immediately pitted against each other, bickering incessantly, like squabbling little school children. But the true goal isn't to convince the public of a specific narrative. No. It's well beyond that. The goal is cognitive capture, to cognitively terraform the mind by utilizing the vulnerabilities of the human mind, which primarily center around pareidolia, apophenia, thus weaponizing that. Effectively, mankind is a lean, mean, pattern recognizing machine. So therefore, you utilize that as the Achilles heel of the human being. So by giving the public a puzzle to solve in ARG, right? By letting them decode the shooter's motives, scrutinize the Secret Service's failures, and argue over the timeline, and of course, argue over the potential esoteric connections and all of this. There's a little something for everyone in here. It's a bit like Disney World. There's a little bit of something here for everyone. Fun for all the family. Fun for all the nation, in this case, right? So the state weaponizes our own apophenia against us. We exhaust all our intellectual and political energy fighting over the details of the simulacra, the poor imitation of an actual crisis event. And this ties in as well to the chevron. Somebody comment many videos ago now, they asked me, what is the chevron symbolism? I think it was in the IPEC GOAT 2, was one of the episodes, but it was in that series. And he asked this. Well, basically it ties in with the toroid. So the downward V is the funnel. This is also the downward facing triangle on the hexagram too. That's what that indicates. It's the receptive feminine, the passive. So in the specific context of the tie, and this is in Vivarium, this is the tie that Martin wears, the V shape often points downward. And this is, and you see this throughout Vivarium as well. So this is the geometric symbol of the vessel or the drain. It signifies the direction of energy flow in the toroidal field we discussed. Everything is being funneled downward from the human spirit into the archontic singularity, and to thus perpetuate the simulacra, the pure imitation, the mimetic struggle within the quote-unquote, simulation. So the toroidal field is the mouth to anus axis of George Bataille or Nick Land, the thirst for annihilation, the La Solaire Anus, the solar anus, and thus it is an enclosed system when the energy simply recycles through periodic reset after periodic reset. And moreover as well, this ties in with the cosmological notion and the cosmogonical notion of solar excess, that human beings, that life itself is the product of solar excess that must be liquidated. This solar excess is a debt, a surplus of debt that must be mechanistically expended through waste, right? And this waste is typically through sacrifice. Why sacrifice? Well, it's in the sort of linguistic, esoteric formation of Latin itself. And sacrifice is made up of a composite of two Latin words, which ultimately translate to make something holy, or to make holy, right? So in that sense, what sacre and facere, to make holy. So ultimately, sacrifice itself is effectively bringing us back to that monadic source, right? It's making things whole, right? It's finishing the circle, right? Finishing the loop. This is what this means. All of these things have been encoded into the language itself. Fundamentally, it doesn't necessarily have to be literal looking glass technology, literal plasma technology, though it may be. Of course, I don't put anything past this reality now, but I can see how this is the literal is weaponized against people. It doesn't necessarily have to be literal. So the core of this concept relies on understanding, the unique geometry of a torus. So in this sort of closed loop trap, which is the geometry, the architecture of the system itself, the torus ultimately has no beginning and no end. It's beyond all of it. This is also ties in with the IAO. So the I is the line, it's the point that draws itself out, right, and into a line. The potential that discharges into energy. You could think of it along the lines as the potential of reactive energy within the population that eventually is drawn out vis-a-vis an initiatory spark. Of course, in the case of what we're talking about, this would have been the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And then A is the triangle. That is the formation, the crystallization of those lines. And then O is the completion of the circle. So this is also found on Templar Abraxas stones. The Abraxas stones themselves go back to the 2nd century AD, at the sort of height of Gnostic Christianity as we would know it today. At the time, it was just known as Christianity, or the Nicene faith. So, yes, so we see, for example, with the hourglass too, there's a temporal idea, meaning it's of time. So it's of measurement, it's of something that can be quantified, and it's of something that can be thus controlled, right? So the toroid is the engine, or it's at least the simulation of an engine, the simulation of motion. So in this geometry, we can observe how the energy, Loosh, in this case, in the case of Vivarium as well, flows outward, right? It loops around the perimeter, the human batteries, and is funneled back into the central singularity, thus perpetuating the system. Loose in this sense, by the way, I don't mean it in the sort of cosmic sense. I mean it just merely as a sort of emotion, electrical motion, right? Emotion. They get you focusing on all of this, and you pay with your attention. You sacrifice your attention to it, right? Meaning you get sort of lost in the rabbit hole. You get lost in the beginning and the end. You don't you're not the god of that situation. You're not on the periphery of the beginning and the end. You're not an external mere observer. You're actually sort of focused into all of this. That's the idea. So this relates to the Mundus Subterraneus, which is the mysteries of the interior. So Athanasius Kircher's Mundus Subterraneus, and we'll tie this in with the Black Rock. This is something else that you find with this Henry Martinez character and those coordinates I was mentioning previously. So this is the idea within Athanasius Kircher's work, is the earth as a machine. This also, by the way, ties in with his Pyrophylaciorum. It ties in with the illustratively and morphologically, that illustration of Athanasius Kircher, the Pyrophylaciorum, parallels the corona virus strain, right? How it was at least computer generated, how it is supposed to look. And funnily enough, as well, there's also another connection, because Athanasius Kircher was one of the sort of proto-subscribers to germ theory. He was actually the grandfather, or one of the intellectual grandfathers of germ theory. So, rather interesting. Funnily enough, as well, this Mundus Subterraneus was applied to that. It was also applied to socio politics as well. So, published in 1665, Kircher's Mundus Subterraneus, the Subterranean World, was a massive, beautifully illustrated attempt to explain the geology of the Earth, not as a dead rock, but as a colossal living alchemical machine. So the ignis centralis, the central fire, Kircher proposed that the Earth was hollow and contained a massive central fire, from which a global network of fiery veins, pyrophylakia, and watery oceans, hydrophylakia, circulated, powering volcanoes and tides and maintaining this self-perpetuating machine. So the modern synthesis with CERN, for example, is the artificial engine of this. So if we look at the Large Hadron Collider through Kircher's eyes, it is a 27 kilometer, of course that's 3 to the power of 3, 33, ring buried deep underground, channeling unimaginably hot energetic plasma and electromagnetic fire. To an esotericist, CERN is not necessarily just a physics lab, it's actually a sort of an attempt to build an artificial ignis centralis, similar to what Kircher at least abstractly described. So the scientists are trying to, in this way, hack the subterranean circulatory system of the planet, manipulating the fundamental fire that Kircher believed animated the world. This fire could, of course, be linked to plasma. And, there is truth to plasma, absolutely, this idea of ionized gases, and potentially it being a model of explication for these cross-cultural archetypes that we see throughout history, and their supposed need for sacrifice, constant human sacrifice and war and strife and chaos, and also debt-laden systems of void economies. The void economy itself is based around the toroidal system, F equals minus F, where F equals 0, right? Plus 1 minus 1, or the positive and the negative, the active resistance and the passive, emotionality. That itself cancels each other out. It's similar to the immovable object meeting the unstoppable force. This is what also powers us, right? Our entire bodily systems, our very life is contingent upon the homeostatic mechanism inherent to all of our bodily functions, both in detail and on a grander holistic scale as well. So this ties in with the Svalbard bunker idea as well, right? But we'll get to that later. I don't necessarily want to touch upon that now. But just to mention too, Bartholomew of Parma, the geomancy and the inverted sky, this is what he was sort of discussing and exploring in his intellectual work. He was a 13th century astronomer and astrologer, and he provides the crucial missing link between the subterranean depths and the shifting stars, the precessional wobble and the precessional cycle as well. So he stated that that there was the Earth was effectively a terrestrial celestial mirror. So he stated that man and a lot of the systems of the world were effectively terrestrial celestial mirrors. So Bartholomew was deeply involved in both the geometry of the celestial spheres, the astronomy that is, and the practice of geomancy, which is the divination by reading the earth. By the way, geomancy is effectively what informs the systems today. It's just become far more scientific and technical. So in this medieval framework, the Earth is not necessarily isolated from space. Every star, every planetary shift, and every celestial wobble is perfectly mirrored in the architecture of the underground. The mundus subterraneus is the inverted sky, effectively. So when you combine Kircher's subterranean machine with Bartholomew's astrological geomancy, coupled with effectively everything else I've explored throughout my studies and my work, be it both in the literary medium and also in the audiovisual medium, the modern hyperstition and the modern empire of spectacle and the theatre of the absurd, and of course informational warfare, ARGs, alternate reality games, all of that is fully validated by classical occultism. In fact, all of this that we see today is simply informational warfare that has sprung forth and been developed out of what would be called the sort of sacred mysteries, right? The occult sciences. So this is what runs your societies. It's what maintains the societies. So the next part I have here, we'll get into later, after I've drawn all of the conclusions of this Rupus Nigra, because otherwise you'll have no idea what the hell I'm about to say. So just to preface this also ties in with mythology, and it ties in with biblical study as well, and also biblical critique. So this starts out actually totally tangentially, but follow along with me and bear with me. Matthew 19:12, quote, "For there are eunuchs who were born that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are those who choose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it," unquote. So this is effectively Jesus exhorting individuals to, well, basically to chop off their wangy, to castrate themselves for the sake of the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, as he states here. So this is in direct contradiction to the command of Genesis 1:28, in which Yahweh directs the seed of Jacob, of whom is the only one considered to be Adam, from Adamah and roots thereof, meaning son of the red earth, to procreate wildly. Quote, "God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it." Now, this is where it gets quite interesting. The Hebrew that's used there is wakabesha, which is from the root to and tread down and beat and make a path through. So to utterly treat the earth as one sees fit and destroy it if needs be. So to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, rule, the word there, the Hebrew word is radah. The root specifically conveys the idea of treading down or trampling, again, same idea, often in the context of a winepress or to conquer. So to rule over the fish of the sea, but literally to trample the fish of the sea and and the birds of the air and every creature that crawls upon the earth. So in short, to fill the entire earth and destroy Mother Nature, as per the key Hebrew words utilized here, there is no stewardship or harmonious living to be sought with nature, but rather that is to be viewed as a beast and subdued as one. Hence, the world is being poisoned, the seas and waterways are being made rancid and undone for the sake of the data center rollout, the digital cage of the servers, akin to Solomon's plasma-esque demonic servers, ones who built his temple and served him. Of course, according to the sigils or the circuit that he wore, and the circuits that he utilized, as we see in the lesser keys of the Goetia, to control these demons, along with the biodigital manifestation of the Lord of all things vis-a-vis the Internet of all things. The internet, the interred net, right? The spider catches you in the web, which is akin to a net. The fish are caught in nets, right? Jesus stated that I shall make you fishers of men, because he's implying that men are fish. We're beasts of the watery illusion of the abyss. This is the idea. We live constantly within the unconscious world. So, or the majority at least do. Forests and untouched landscapes are making way for solar generation and rare earth mineral strip mining. So Don asked me, so Mount Meru, which has been also called the Black Rock, which also has been stated it is magnetized and also can correlate to the gods coming down to the mountain, like Mount Sinai or Olympus, doesn't this also correlate to the center of the earth? There are a lot of things connecting in my head to other things I have heard. Isn't there also a rock stone that supposedly Queen Elizabeth always sat on? And there is a piece of the rock or cube in Mecca that is missing or something like that. I've always wondered what if they found a way to trap all the gods, plasma entities, etc. And that is what flows through our ley lines, trapped plasma. I would say spirit runs material. So that's in a movie, maybe Ghostbusters, where the goo is and music is connected. It starts to move intentionally, unquote. And I stated, yes, the center of the earth or the axis mundi itself. Moreover, in Hindu myths, which I'm aware I'm currently tying the thread of this mystery cult and the grand conspiracy to its earliest origins in the Harappan or Indus Valley civilization, it is said that the Suras fell from Mount Meru in a drunken stupor or through sheer vanity. In any case, they grew belligerent as a result and perennially, with an unrelenting tenacity, sought to reclaim that fatal slope once more, back to, of course, their heavenly abode as the sort of prodigal sons of the fall. Naturally, this mythic dispossession laid the foundation for the resultant myths of Lucifer, Prometheus, Anzu, etc., and they all bear similar characteristics to the ancient Asuras, of whom were also associated with the East and the Dawn. Usras and Avestan means dawn or east, and it bears transliterative roots with Asura and Sura. This can be likened to a multiplicity of ideas, including the Masonic greeting of the easterly traveller going to the west to seek for that which was lost, and to Isaiah 14:12, which makes complete sense now in light of the Asura mythology. Quote, how you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, Asuras, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations, unquote. This also ties in with Shemyaza, the Watchers, pretty much, all of it. And Shemyaza also was the first to set out a secret society of 200 angels, of the fallen. And he brought them together and made them all swear oaths of imprecation, meaning cursed oaths, blood oaths, to the cause, to the sacrilegious cause of climbing the fatal slope to heaven once more. When you basically boil this down, the idea is in Gnosticism is that Kabbalah, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, I mean, whatever really, is that the mysteries themselves, that which came from Atlantis, is that we are effectively the fallen star, right? Hence why the star is the pentacle. And the inverted pentagram itself is man in his fallen state, where spirit is lower than that of the duality of fire and water, that of the duality of matter. So the idea is we're separated, we're not whole. And so in that sense, we are the demiurge. We are Yaldabaoth. We are the Asuras. We are Lucifer. We are Prometheus. We are the serpent in the garden, right? To them as well, we are also God. There's a sort of monism behind all of this. So on the mountain notion, of which El Shaddai derives from the older Akkadian Bel Shadesh, or the Lord of, quite literally the Lord of the mountain, or the God of the mountain, when it got to El Shaddai, we would find them seeking their abode in the lowly mountains of the periphery of their fallen dwelling of earth, as it would be their substitute for Meru until such time they could reascend its fatal slope. This is the sort of, again, if it is plasma entities, this is the plasma entities, right, that have fallen to earth and have sought vessels of man in the elites, the ruling classes, and they have promised unto them all that glitters, all the gold in the mines, right, all the riches and status and all the titles upon the earth, all land upon the earth. They've promised them everything, a new heaven and earth, if they merely just follow their commands, right? So there's that potential as well. Or, of course, this is also found in the archetype of the Lord of the Earth, which suspiciously is cross-cultural. By cross-cultural, I mean it's pretty much found in every single culture known to man. There are a few notable exceptions, but only a very, very few. So, as is stated in Deuteronomy 33:2, referring to Yahweh and his inseparable connection to the mountain, the Lord came from Mount Sinai and dawned over them from Seir. There's the dawn again, right, from the east. In Hebrew, by the way, Seir means hairy goat, which is like the devil or Baphomet. He shone forth from Mount Paran. He came with myriads of holy ones, Asuras, Elohim, a fallen host, ergo Yahweh Zeviot, which would later become the transliterated Sabazios and Sabaoth. That also became the sort of synonymous and syncretized Attis, who was the consort of Cybele, who became the Magna Mater in Rome. And by the way, all of these cults they're connected to transgenderism or transvestites and sort of decadence and debauchery and decay, as we see, for example, of the Gali or Galu priest class. That was also a category of demons in Acadia. Anyway, so yeah, and this goes all the way to Bacchus and Dionysus, who were most likely foreign infiltrant, or infiltrating rather, subversive foreign cults into classical Greece, classical Cappadocia or Asia Minor, and of course classical Rome. So what you see here as well, he came with myriads of holy ones. You also see in the Bible too that Yahweh almost hates the host of heaven, right? It's interesting. It's almost like there's a animosity there in certain passages, not all passages, but certain. So it would appear the holy ones that he brought were perhaps fallen. Perhaps watchers, Grigori. Yahweh perhaps is Shem Yaza. Shem Yaza itself is merely a sort of descriptor. It's an epithet, actually. an appellation, and from Hebrew it means the one who stares at heaven, quite literally. So again, you're like that Oscar Wilde quote, the one who is in the gutter but staring at the stars. So this is Shem Yaza. This is Yahweh, right? This is Yahweh. So both Sanskrit Asura and Avestan Ahura derive from the common Proto-Indo-Aryan root, Asura meaning Lord or mighty. Hence, we now worship the Lord as opposed to God, and recall as well that in the Shema prayer, it is stated that Adonai Eloheinu, or the Lord is God. Indeed, if the Lord were God, then why not simply refer to him as such? Why insist on using a subordinate ducal title rather than a kingly one? And moreover, as well, there's certain lexicographers, that state that the Sanskrit Asura, when it went westward, of course in Zoroastrianism, the Devas and the Asuras got flipped around and inverted. The Asuras became the good ones, or the Ahuras rather, became the good ones, the benevolent class of deities, and the Devas became the demonic class of deities. Very interesting. Almost satanic or adversarial, you could say, right? And then it went ever further westward into West Asia, or what we would know as the Eastern Mediterranean, the Levant, Mesopotamia, and then the Semitic peoples eventually turned that into Yahura, and then that got abbreviated into Yahoo, and then eventually that got altered with pronunciation into Yahweh. The reason for that is because the Heliopolis, which was the Greek version of the ancient Egyptian, it was the Greek transliteration, or the Greek name of the ancient Egyptian city Yawen, right? So Greeks called the city of Yawen, which in ancient Egypt means the pillars, which links with masonry, and it also links with the Sephirotic tree of life, right? Remember, there's 3 pillars. The Greeks called it Heliopolis, the city of the sun. Interesting, again, the sun, the circle, the solar cycle, the recursive cycle, like the toroid itself, and of course it relates to the idea of the plasma entity. Anyway, so this was Yahweh and Yahoo, and the two conjoined through a Semitic tribe called the Shasu, who were part of the Hyksos Confederacy. And then eventually they got ousted. And there was a little back and forth between ancient Egypt and the Proto-Israelites, who were the Arameans and the Canaanites, and basically the Amorites. Canaanite means lowland Amorite, and Aram, or Aramean, means highland Amorite. Of course, after a while, they just dropped the sort of Amorite notion or epithet or a cultural identity, and they became Arameans. They created a melting pot culture, a divergent culture, and so did the Canaanites. So they were part of these areas, and the Israelites eventually emerged from them as their own distinct ethno-religious group. Ethnically, they were similar, but religiously they were divergent. Anyway, regarding the Jacob's Pillow Stone, the Stone of Destiny, Stone of Scone, the original of which, the one in Britain, is most definitely not, was said to be akin to a meteoric betulous stone and was most likely dark grey or black in colour, akin to the Kaaba, or the cube stone in Mecca. So in the idea of trapped plasma, well, if the transtemporal containment field and the essence of the plasma entity are comprised and maintained through the siphoning of or mass release of biophotonic energy, blood, or emotionality, hence the harvest metaphors for God's judgment found in many Abrahamic eschatological texts, even Genesis 1:28 states to trample things down, to conquer them, to basically entirely destroy them, and to rule them. This would explain the machinic need to industrially sacrifice human time, energy, and life force through sacrificial systems of perpetual debt-ladenness. Again, the void economy, F equals minus F. Thus, it cancels each other out. Is the toroid. It's a hermetically sealed system, an enclosed system where energy can never escape. It's constantly recycled around, and it maintains itself that way. This also relates to Robert Monroe's ideas about Loosh and provides a real-world explanation and the pragmatic attachment of that to that perplexingly inhuman and anti-human system. Consequently, this explains the theatre of civilizations and the hyperstitional, self-fulfilling prophecy terrain of history too. It is designed to have us engage and release our biophotonic energy, attention or engagement, or blood, which is thus the lifeblood of the system, quite literally. Case in point, the recent White House Correspondents' Dinner and the alternate reality game being played with the Henry Martinez connection, along with the Time Machine and Looking Glass tech connection. Succinctly put, it is designed to compel engagement with the system and to stir such compulsion through the lens of permacrisis. By the way, as well, I've been thinking, and the idea that you see, for example, with Atonism. Aton, by the way, in ancient Egyptian means solar disk. So it's converse to that of Amun, which, funnily enough, was his singular religious rival. Two deities were nemesis. Amun means the hidden one in ancient Egyptian. So it's literally the hidden potential behind the sun. It is the point in the monad. The Aton is the disk. It's the circular loop of the monad. Right? So the Aton is the material imitation of the cosmic toroidal system. Right? The circle of life. And the Amun is the sort of natural or original one. Right? So Aton is the simulacra of that. This is what you see of the monadic symbol. So just to point that out here. So we have this. So again, strange sort of UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, found in paintings and such, right? Supposedly historical paintings. So, I mean, there's a myriad of these. You'll see it discharges lightning. Very similar to, I think his name was John Constable, and his works on the amoeba-like plasma. And this ties in with Wilhelm Reich's work as well. There's the Book of Ezekiel. You have, of course, Yahweh at the top. And remember, Yahweh, very similar to Sauron in the descriptions thereof, inside this plasma contained between the two poles of, or the two columns of Barad-dûr at the top, at the pinnacle of the tower. And Sauron is a silhouette encased in fire, similar to Yahweh. The Ophanim, which, funnily enough, is similar to, I think, the zoetrope with the eyes going round the wheels. The idea is that the world is maintained through perception. The wheel of the world is maintained through perception. And it's maintained vis-a-vis pure confoundment, sort of four-dimensionally, if you will, right? Relating to confoundment. You see the same thing with the seraphim, but that relates to the fiery serpent. That quite literally means a fiery serpent, and it relates to the idea of Thuban or Draco. We may get into that here. We might not really have time because this has already went on long enough. This video, but so yes, the wheels of perception, right? The empire of spectacle. It is the subject of the mind that maintains the objective reality itself, at least from the human level. And so the idea is that the paint is that instrument or that object which perceives and confines the potentiality that's discharged onto the canvas, right? So the idea is, on the canvas, you can create anything you want, but the paint itself has to perceive it, right? And the paint eventually itself becomes that which will eventually dictate what that potential is narrowed to. So this is the distinction you see in transcendental idealism, mentioned by Hegel, Kant, et al., and Allah, the idea of this notion of the dichotomy between the object of reality and the subject of the mind, or the subject of reality. This is also found, as well as we see with Kabbalah, in the quote mystery of the eye. So the iris, the rainbow, is the the refraction of light, which divides it into color, into the spectrum of color potentials, right? So it narrows the potentiality of it within a band of color. And of course, the white light contains all of that as a sort of monadic pleroma, a fullness of the thing. And it's that the white light itself is the pupil. The pupil from Latin means orphan. So the idea is that we are severed from the original. We are an orphan, cosmically speaking. So you see here the Rupus nigra and the Polus arcticus. We're going to get into this. So that's where basically Aten and Akhenaten derive from. Akhenaten's potentially Moses. You'll have to read Ahmed Osman's work. Akhenaten is Moses. He's got another two interesting works that accompany that hypothesis, and I found the evidence quite compelling. This was the first one true God, the first monotheistic cult. Aten, of course, an ancient Egyptian. That T could be, when it got transliterated into Hebrew, because Hebrew has a lot of ancient Egyptian loanwords, and I have a set of notes where it counts at least 300 loanwords in Hebrew from ancient Egyptian. But typically when they transliterate it, the T becomes a D, so Aten becomes Aden, that later morphs into Adon, and then of course we get the majestic plural of Adonai. So that's where that came from. So this is the trapped plasma, right? So if we treat the string of digits of at Henry Ma or Martinez 795618893, that's the Twitter handle, as a cipher for geographic coordinates, there are a few standard ways to parse it. We're only going to look at one way. So as you can see at the top left, this is where it's going to point to. But anyway, we'll go through this. So splitting the 8 digits evenly into a latitude and longitude pair, 79.56 degrees north, 18.93 degrees east, the coordinates drop a pin in the high Arctic. The exact coordinate points to the eastern coast of the Spitsbergen, the largest island of the Svalbard archipelago in Norway. It also places us almost in an exact point between 4 streams, right? Similar to, again, the Rupus nigra, the black rock. Of course, that's why black rock. The asset managers are named as such. You also have the black stone mercenary group as well. You've got other, black rock, black stone connections and sort of symbolic connections with corporate naming. Anyway, you'll notice it also has 4 streams tying into this. So, of course, links with the 4 elements, but you can see it points to the Polus Arcticus, and the idea is around the black stone, these 4 rivers fed in, or streams or rivers fed into an eternal whirling pool. So again, with the idea that we see of the Lord of the Earth, typically, as we see of Yahweh, for example, and Baal and such, and even Amaru, Bel Amaru, Bel Hadad, or just Hadad, all of these characters, these deities, were typically associated with storms and war, storm and war deities. We can see here the storm is associated with plasma, it's associated with electromagnetism, and interestingly, it's associated with time, right? So it's associated with the temporal. Therefore, the temporal dimension is the thing which effectively defines Earth, defines the earthly realm, dimensionally speaking. Thus, these are the lords of the world, fundamentally. The Demiurgos, Yaldabaoth, right? The Sackless, the Blind One. So Svalbard is one of the most geopolitically significant and heavily monitored regions on Earth. Most notably, it is the home of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, the ultimate literal doomsday bunker designed to survive global catastrophes, asteroid strikes, and climate collapse. So it, of course, fits perfectly into the potential architectural objectives of the ballroom or Baal room, right? Because remember, the ballroom has two sections. One is basically a subterranean city, has its own hospital and logistical systems down there, and what have you. And the one at the top is that of the ballroom, right? The guys, which of course is shaped like Solomon's temple, interestingly. Anyway, that's the sort of meta vernacular that is being pointed to here. Conversely, if we read the entire string as a single latitude, measurement in degrees, minutes, and seconds, it creates a ring around the extreme top of the globe. The point is located near the interior glaciers of Dixon Land, north of the main settlement of Longyearbyen. So this line of latitude cuts directly through the high Arctic ice shelves, northern Greenland, the Svalbard archipelago, and crucially, right through the southern tip of the Franz Josef land archipelago, which is the exact island chain containing Zemlya, Georgia. So in short, it points to the Rupus Nigra, the black rock, as we see from Mercator's maps of the 16th century. So if we are treating this thought experiment as an overarching, centuries-long operation, right, the building of the new Atlantis, if you will, then all these Arctic coordinates, plasma technologies, and magnetic anomalies do indeed point directly to the center of the North Pole. However, is this just part of the alternate reality game? Is it designed to be breadcrumbs to be found so that we, the masses, the Hansel and Gretels of the masses, can be led down the garden path and into, of course, the clutches of the evil witch, to be trapped in our evil lair? So regarding Mercator's magnetic mountain, in ancient and medieval geography, both before the Arctic was physically explored, it was widely believed that the exact geographic North Pole stood a massive 33-mile wide mountain of pure black magnetic rock. The most famous depiction of the Rupus Nigra is on the Gerardus Mercator's 1595 map of the Arctic, the Septentrionalium Terrarium Descriptio, septum from the Latin, meaning 7, and triones, again from the Latin, generally understood to mean plough oxen, thus relating to the 7 stars of the Big Dipper, plough, or Ursa Major, or the Great Bear. So he drew the North Pole not as an ice cap, but as a giant black stone surrounded by a massive whirlpool where the world's oceans drained into the hollow earth. Explorers needed to explain why compass needles always pointed north, Thus, the logical conclusion in the 16th century was that a colossal lodestone, a magnetic rock, must sit at the top of the world, pulling the metal towards it. So let's bring the Rupus nigra into the modern ballroom or ballroom. We could call it the temporal integratron idea. So in light of Trump's calls for that and the extension, we can also relate it to Tesla's Warden Cliff Tower. So in addition to the White House bunker dome, potentially, the Warden Cliff Tower acted as a dielectric grounds, which is a structure meant to grip the Earth and broadcast or receive frequencies. So in esoteric lore, the Rupus nigra is not just a rock, it is the original natural integratron. It is the central axis or axis mundi of the Earth's magnetic field, the ultimate antenna, interacting directly with the atmospheric plasma, the auroras, and the shadow biosphere. This is probably what a lot of the pyramids were for as well, according to esoteric lore. For example, the Demon of the Echo, was it Joseph P. Farrell, his work with that. So, connecting this to Svalbard, this decoding, if we could call it that, this analysis of the bot's handle, of course, points to Svalbard, right? It makes sense here with the sort of looking glass technology and plasma. Again, is it meant to lead us down this garden path? Is that just merely an ARG to socially prime us with this idea for potentially its use in a fake alien invasion, and who knows, right? So to take it in another sort of model or avenue of explanation, we may say that Svalbard is one of the closest habitable landmasses to the North Pole. So if an elite Bain Salem faction, a Kabbalistic faction seeking mass conflagration to sort of reclaim the Atlantean Empire of old, if they were building a doomsday vault or a massive radar array like Escat, or seeking to metaphorically or metaphysically reascend Mount Meru like the fallen Asuras of old, then they would place it as close to the Rupus nigra's magnetic axis as physically possible, right? Or they would at least allude to it within their symbolism, which is, of course, what we see with this event. So the mythological narrative, that of the Black Cube and Saturn. So in deeper occult lore, the black stone at the center is a reoccurring archetype. It is often associated with the worship of Saturn, which generally relates to time, limitation, and material reality. It's frequently represented by a black cube, at least in sort of modern symbolic parlance as well. So if the elite are building a time machine, right, if they're trying to bend reality, for argument's sake, as suggested in, the ARG Psyop, or that of the extrapolated White House Correspondents' Dinner, or at least they're desirous of building, a sort of looking glass or quantum key, tapping into the magnetic North Pole, the literal axis on which the Earth spins and time is calculated, would be the ultimate symbolic goal, right? We're going to get back into Athanasius Kircher after this, and it'll tie into what we've been discussing here. So it would suggest that potentially the new Atlantis is trying to mechanically replicate or physically harness the magnetic and plasmic power of the black rock at the top of the world. So we see as well that this area is actually contained in, what is a protected area of Svalbard. So again, very, very interesting. It pointed to this place exactly. Why? Right? Is it all just part of creating this ARG, this effect? Who knows, right? So as Heraclitus wrote in fragment B64, quote, lightning lures all entities toward order. He also stated in fragment B3031, quote, this cosmos, the same for all, neither any god nor human has made, but it always was, is, and will be, an ever-living fire, plasma, kindling and extinguishing in measured rhythms. The pyrophylakia, right? Or, of course, the toroidal field, as we would know it today. Right? Again, all of this ties in. You also see the armillary sphere, which relates to the quantum, Bloch's quantum sphere. This is all tied into plasma, tied into the Ophanim as well. We read of the Ophanim. This is from Ezekiel 1, verses 15 to 19. And Ophanim means, comes from the Hebrew for wheels, right? The plural for wheels. Quote, as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its four faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all four looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the four directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all four rims were full of eyes all around. When the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved. And when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose. Right? So this is plasmic in nature, the way it's being described, which is interesting. We also have this as well, again, back to the looking glass, the dead ufologists and plasma scientists that was being bandied about suspiciously by the mainstream media. So David Wilcox in this explains Project Looking Glass, and that was the FIFA trophy design in Trump's office. That's a layout of the proposed ballroom. So the executive residence, or rather the main building of the White House within the complex, is only 55,000 feet squared. This is 90,000 feet squared, and that's just the above ground section. That doesn't account for obviously the below ground sections and basically the subterranean city that will exist there. So again, what the hell is going on here? And as you can see, it's shaped very, let's just call it what it is, Judaically. It looks extremely Judaic. I don't know how else to describe it. It looks similar, very similar to that of the Second Temple, the Herodian Temple. It's quite the the architecture is quite Herodian, right? It's this sort of Judeo-Hellenic architecture. But of course, we know this would be the case because he's got Jewish architects working for him. Most of their work is based around the renovation and construction of synagogues. So, that's where that comes from. As we can see here, this is the Illuminati card game, Spasm of Violence. By playing this card, you may combine two assassinations on the same target. Interesting. We're on the third assassination now. You must play both of the assassination cards as well. Pick one of the assassinations to be the main one and follow all the instructions on its card. Add the power, but none of the other effects of the other assassination. Interesting. So as you can see, it's almost the same venue that this is occurring. And it's interesting. We see the wine as well being shot there because there was a lot of theft of the wine. I think it was around about $76,000 that was spent just on the wine for that, White House Correspondents' Dinner. And the media, the moral arbiters and upstanding members of society that they are, were using the sort of commotion to steal the wine. Full bottles of wine underneath their arm, just running out of the building with them. And here's another meme that was floating about in 2016, but of course now has been doing the rounds for obvious reasons. Donald Trump in 1980 stated, quote, Why do time travelers keep trying to kill me? I'm just a realtor. Interesting. Some serious predictive programming here, right? All the way back to 1980. So that's some, 46 years ago. Almost half a century ago. So as we can see there, there's the pareidolia art and Cole Allen. We can now go into tying this in with what Athanasius Kircher and Bartholomew of Parma mentioned with the mundus subterraneus. So in Kircher's model, the surface of the earth is merely the skin of the organism. You could think of it like a fungus, right? It's the outer layer. I forget what they call it now, but it's the mycelium skin. So it's subject to weather, plagues, and cosmic radiation. The true power and stability lie in the deep, in the chthonic realms. This is why they venerate the idea, or the archetype at least, of Saturn or Cronus. These are chthonic deities. This is why, of course, they construct underground facilities as well, right? There's also a sort of psycho-spiritual dimension to this too. So when the modern elite build doomsday bunkers or vaults in the Arctic or massive subterranean compounds, they are retreating into the mundus subterraneus. They are bypassing the vulnerable skin of the world to sit closer to the planetary engine. To recall our discourse that's now ongoing about the North Pole, of course, we've mentioned Thuban, I've mentioned that with Eros previously, and the invisible tower of the Earth's axis, the axis mundi. Bartholomew's worldview dictates that if the axis of the stars changes from Thuban to Polaris, and of course through the entirety of all seven, again, it's all seven, right? We have 7 planetary genii in classical astronomy. Saturn is the last one. And we have, of course, 7 pole stars. So this mires occult sciences with the numerology of 7. But it goes through 7 pole stars. Polaris and Thuban are next to one another. Thuban, of course, precedes the preceding Polaris. And so when that occurs, when these pole stars change, Bartholomew of Parma dictates that the internal subterranean architecture of the Earth must also violently shift to reflect that. So I think the idea that they're trying to sort of hatch in their mind is that if they can affect this world, they can affect the subterranean, the core of the Earth, the very makeup of the Earth, if you will, then they can actually, the microcosm can affect the macrocosm, right? They can control the system. They may be able to even transcend the system, transcend the bounds of it. So the grand unification of this idea is found in the celestial problem, right? So firstly, the Earth is trapped in the precessional wobble, the precessional cycle, ruled by the usurper star Polaris, having fallen away from the ancient dragon Thuban. This is the idea, of course, the serpent falling from heaven. So the idea is that from roughly 3900 BC to 1700 BC, Thuban, which in Arabic means the serpent, Alpha Draconis, part of the tail of the Draco constellation, the dragon constellation, that which coils around the Ursa Minor. Yeah, where is contained Polaris in its tail, interestingly. The idea with this is that the Atlantis occurred in this period, so they have to reclaim it, right? It's this idea of reclaiming ancient wisdom. That's what ultimately underpins all of this. So that's where you get the fallen serpent and all of this notion, right? It's the mark of Cain and the seed of Cain and all of this idea. So when it was knocked off the center and Polaris became the pole star, the dominant pole star, of course it fell from heaven. So the subterranean solution, so because as above, so below, the only way to fix the sky is to hack the earth. The tools being utilized for this would be like looking glass, of course, plasma technology, the modern elite construction of, for example, the Large Hadron Collider, the particle decelerator. It's a massive artificial vein of fire in the Mundus Subterraneus, right? It acts as an engine of sorts. They build the Doomsday Vaults and Svalbard all over the world to act as the grounding pins near the magnetic North Pole, perhaps, right? And they intend to use the subterranean fire to force a geomantic shift, clicking the heels, so to say, within the world of Oz. Oz in Hebrew means strength, by the way, relating to energy or power of the planet to stop the wobble, end the simulation of time, and realign the Earth with the ancient stars, thus refounding the new Atlantis or the New Jerusalem or the Ben Salem or Zion. So Kircher and Bartholomew did exactly what the author of the Zohar did, or the architects behind CERN, what they did, and of course what we're still doing to this day and will continue to do most probably into the foreseeable future, is that they looked at the terrifying, incomprehensible forces of nature, volcanoes, earthquakes, shifting stars, quantum physics, and they built a magnificent, almost mythopoetic system to make it feel deliberate and meaningful, right? So this is what underpins even power itself and what maintains these secret societies within their sort of transgressive criminal fraternities. So ultimately, it comes down to the idea that humanity has an impulse to believe that a secret intelligence is controlling the chaos from the shadows rather than accepting the chaos is controlling us. And power itself believes that, right? I'm not saying that is incorrect. I'm just saying it's a rather interesting impulse that humanity seems to possess there. So also to mention as well, about 3000 BC or so, so what's that, about 5,000 years ago? Again, these all align with the Anno Lucis Masonic calendar. It's year zero at 4000 BC, and that of the Anno Mundi calendar, which is year zero is October 7th, 3761 BC. And that's nearest Dammit to the 3900 BC, approximately, point at which Thuban became the North Star. Very interesting. What's behind that? Who knows, right? It must have something to do with the serpent and to Thuban. Are these serpent stellar cults? Is that what fundamentally runs us today? Who knows? Anyway, that area would have been pointing almost directly to Thuban. However, today, those stars, of course, wander around very close to our own North Star now, which is Polaris. That itself almost echoes the Arctic Circle in a weird sort of way, right? Again, if you were to take the Arctic Circle and to overlay the precessional cycle on it, I bet Svalbard, to where the precessional cycle is now with Polaris, I bet Svalbard would probably point to an interesting location, probably Thuban, perhaps. Again, who knows what's behind this? So it's the idea that they want to return to the source. If we relate it to plasmic entities, the idea is that they want to create a sort of shadow biosphere through biodigitalism or a mass conflagration, a seismic changing of the Earth to revert back to a sort of Atlantean civilization, to exhume Atlantis through this. And the idea is that the end is the beginning. In esoteric cycles, the goal is often to return to the Golden Age, as we've mentioned, by building the Doomsday Bunker at coordinates that historically pointed to Thuban. Let's assume that, there is Doomsday Bunkers there. In fact, there are Doomsday Bunkers there, I do believe. There's also the Doomsday Seed vault there as well. They are basically suggesting the idea of the processional cycle and resets. They are perhaps even communicating that they're going to try and survive a coming apocalypse so they can re-emerge when the axis aligns with the dragon once again, or they're going to try and precipitate that in some way, I don't know. So the shift from Thuban, which is the reptilian, the dragon, to Polaris, the mammalian or the bear, is often viewed in fringe esoteric lore as a sort of shift in galactic governance or energetic epochs. It may even mirror the idea that you see in our popular mythology of dinosaurs, right? So the dinosaurs died and the mammalians took over. Perhaps there's something like that written in to this, and stemming from the esoteric. So, and with that, that's pretty much it. That's everything I have to cover on this this event. I'll just check. Oh yes, regarding Project Bluebeam and the fake alien invasion, with the introduction of looking glass tech and plasma into the sort of conspiratorial zeitgeist and thus the popular discourse, it almost creates an illusion of inevitability for a fake alien invasion, which would lead to a deterministic totalitarian government, right? It would bring us all together, unite the planet under a one world government. That's the general gist of that. So this is almost creating the illusion of inevitability surrounding that. It's socially priming the public. So there is that potential too, right? So yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything. The Henry Martinez thing, of course, as well. Cole Allen Thomas, I think that's his name, isn't it? Cole Thomas Allen, something like that. You'll notice as well, all of these assassins, Lee Harvey Oswald, Thomas Matthew Crooks. So why the three names? Well, the psychological reason for it, fundamentally, the cause is bureaucratic. It's to affect the human psyche. For instance, we have a sort of rhythm and finality to it. A three-part name has a distinct metric rhythm. It's often what's known as a dactyl or an anapest in poetry. So it sounds official, complete, almost irreversible. It sounds like a name read from a judgment scroll. And moreover as well, there's a loss of humanity. Most normal people go by two names, John Smith or a nickname Johnny. Using three names strips the individual of their causal humanity. They're no longer a person, they are an event. And they become a dark archetype, one that is siphoned and rather segregated from the normal population. And Cole Allen was also associated with NASA too, and a few other things as well. But so to conclude, if we look at this merely as an ARG, which I actually think it is, alternate reality game, phase one would be to prime the public with the idea that time is being managed. Looking Glass, EU Time Machine, linking this with Henry Martinez. How the hell did he know this in advance? He must be a time traveler, so on and so forth. Phase two, demonstrate timeline control through high-profile events that seem predicted. Trump, Martinez, all of this idea, as we've just mentioned. And then phase three, introduce the external other, which is UAPs, plasma tech, plasma entities, right? Holographic technology, essentially, to create a light show, the ultimate spectacle of the empire of spectacle. And so it's to secure perpetual management. It's like what power always wants, the perpetuation of power indefinitely and the centralization of all power unto itself. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers every single aspect of this. If I've missed anything out, just let me know. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So either the whole plasma looking glass tech is real, or this is just merely a ARG, an alternate reality game for the dissident population, and an overall staged and managed event for the normal population, a Psyop.